Solway. Coming to you from my apartment. This is Caleb Wade McCain, and here today I've got some interesting things to talk about. We're going to be talking about the goddess Cybele. She was originally a Phrygian goddess, the only known Phrygian goddess that's extant to the modern day, which is pretty interesting, that she survived through not the Phrygian line, but Roman and Greek mythology. Cybele's arrival in Rome is actually a pretty interesting story because she came to Rome during the later parts of the Second Punic War. In 205 BCE, there was a reading of the Cybele books, which were a collection of texts that were stored in Rome that would act as prophecies that would help guide the city and its people during times of dire need and crises, such as the Second Punic War, where Hannibal was marching across southern Italy, causing havoc, and the situation for the Romans was quite bad at the time. So, upon reading the books, the Romans knew that they had to summon the goddess Cybele to Rome, and that if they did so, she would grant them victory over Hannibal and the Carthaginians. So, Livy, the historian, actually regales us with how this occurred and how this sort of came to be. In accordance with an oracle found in the Cybele books, which is stated that a foreign invader would be expelled if the Idaean mother, referring to Cybele, had been brought to Rome, the Idaean mother was brought to Rome from the Phrygian town Pessinus. She was given to the Romans by King Attalus of Asia. Now, it's actually quite interesting the situation of her summoning to Rome, because there's been debates among scholars about why she was even summoned, brought to Rome in the first place. Was it out of this dire need that if we don't do something drastic, if we don't have divine intervention, are we going to lose? Is Rome going to be destroyed? Or was it because the Romans had a reinvigorated fighting spirit in the wake of several victories in the years prior, leading up to her summoning in the year 204 BCE? In 1990, Eric Gruen put forth this theory first. Prior to 1990, it was commonly accepted that Rome was in a complete dire situation, total crisis, and that Cybele was summoned as a need for victory, as divine intervention. Eric Gruen, however, wanted to pose a different theory. His theory is essentially that Rome, in the wake of several victories, called Cybele to the city because they were reinvigorated and that this would be a final push to defeat Carthage. However, the classicist Paul Burton, in his article, The Summoning of the Magna Mater to Rome, 205 BC, argues against this thought. He says that this is using a lot of hindsight that the Romans would not have had. At the time that Cybele was summoned, Mago had just entered northern Italy and Hannibal was still at large in southern Italy. So the situation would have been quite poor at the time. Two foreign invaders on either side of Rome, threatening to destroy the Republic forever. This was not a time for celebration. This was a time for desperation. And so she was brought to Rome, and soon after, the Second Punic War would come to a close with a Roman victory. It's kind of interesting, though, since the Romans traced their roots back to Troy being in the Phrygian area, the Romans likened Cybele to a mother goddess of Troy, so their ancestors, and they kind of ran with this idea, and later sources would use this and expand upon this, such as Virgil in his Aeneid. He talks about Cybele a lot and actually makes her the mother of all the gods, the mother of Jupiter himself, the king of the gods. In Book 9 of the Aeneid, Cybele is shown helping Aeneas, helping the Trojans achieve their fate, and which would ultimately lead to the founding of Rome and all the way down to the Republic and, of course, the Roman Empire, starting with Augustus and his family. In the Aeneid, she's a really helpful figure for Aeneas and the Trojans in securing their fate and actually accomplishing their goals of getting to Italy and thus kickstarting this whole Roman idea. Though, of course, They themselves are not Roman, nor will they ever claim to be. In Book 9, she goes to Jupiter with a request. For as they are fleeing Troy, they need ships, they need a fleet in order to get to Italy. And so they go to her mountain, and she gives to them her trees to build her fleet, their fleet. And so she goes to Jupiter with this request. Loosen the grip of my fears. Let her prayers win this much for your mother. Power to keep my trees from destruction when battered by any voyage, tornado, or gale. Let them profit from birth on my mountains. So, she is the mother of all the gods, the mother of the king of the gods, and she has gone to him to help protect the Trojans in securing their fate. Virgil uses Cybele in this way for quite a few reasons, I would say, but the main one is to connect this goddess to the Trojans and thus make her more Roman. And why is he doing that at all? That's a better question to ask. Augustus himself was actually quite fond of Cybele and worshipped her in many ways. Indeed, on the Palatine Hill, he lived directly next to Cybele's temple. He actually used her image in a lot of ways. And indeed, his wife, Livia Drusilla, actually became the model for a lot of Cybele's images. Or, if not the model, she was, in her own images, she was made to be a lookalike to Cybele, to call upon this divine image, to make the imperial family legitimate, to show that they are connected to Cybele. And indeed, since Julius Caesar, the adoptive father of Augustus, traced his line to Venus, Augustus actually went a step further than that. He traced it back to Cybele, being the mother of all the gods. So, why is Augustus having Livia shown as Cybele? It's for legitimacy, it's for this divine image, it's for his own authority, the authority of the imperial family. And indeed, our Cybele here, she is found in the John Paul Getty Museum. And in the article by Robert McKay Wilhelm, Cybele, the Great Mother of Augustan Order, he says, the most outstanding visual representation of Livia as Cybele is to be found in the J. Paul Getty Museum, where a statue of a seated Cybele has been identified as a copy of a seated Livia statue. Wow, that's something right there. I mean, he's literally one for one making his wife this goddess. And indeed, if you look at the later Julio-Claudian images, they make themselves gods. Augustus is doing this as well. All of his images are controlled. And all of them, he is a healthy young man, no matter when they were made. Through the art that people are seeing in their everyday lives, Augustus is creating this image of authority, this godly power that him and his family can trace back to. And going back to the Aeneid, in Book 6, actually, during the famous scene where they're in the underworld and Aeneas is seeing this future, Cybele is invoked once more. Well fulfilled in her offspring of men, as is mighty Cybele, who in her turreted crown rides a chariot drawn through the Phrygian cities, the radiant mother of gods who embraces 100 grandchildren, all live in heaven, each claiming the sky as a birthright. Marshal your eyes, twin gaze this way now, look at this people, look at your Romans, for Caesar is here, all Iulus' descendants, marching towards their places beneath sky's arching expanses. In this important scene in the Aeneid, Virgil is directly creating a link between Augustus and his family and Cybele, not Venus, not the Venus who was the mother of Aeneas and who Julius Caesar traced his line to, but we go out further. We have Augustus tracing back not to Venus, but directly to Cybele, the mother of all the gods. This is a direct appeal to authority and divine image. Augustus is using this as a way to prop himself up and prop his rule up with divine authority, which I think is just extremely interesting to me, right? Because Augustus is doing a lot for his image. In all of his depictions and all of his art, it's controlled, it's exact. And here it's the same. He's having Livia be Cybele, he's having this divine image of all of his family. He's doing this for very specific reasons, and I think it's interesting how using these physical depictions, how he used them to increase his own authority and to increase his legitimacy among the Roman people. With all of that having been said, however, I would like to thank you for watching, and I hope this has been interesting for you. Now, I hope to see you again soon, but if I don't, well, this is Caleb, signing off.